Andre.
All right, y'all, what's going on? It's Zeta Plug, and we're gonna get into our first little interview. Welcome to the show. My first interview is gonna be quite interesting. I'm interviewing my dad, so I hope y'all like it, and I hope y'all get a lot of jewels from the conversation that we talk about. So we're gonna get into it. I'm about to pass the mic and let him introduce himself.
Mike Hunter.
And of course, y'all already know, just based on that reply, that's my dad. So y'all ain't even gotta worry about if that's true or not. So what? I'm not gonna say what. We're gonna get into the beginning. Obviously, people don't know who you are and where you're from and all of that stuff. So we're gonna get into your origin, your bio.
Let's see. Basically, I'm from Buffalo, born and raised in Buffalo, moved down to the country, to Alabama when I was, what I'd say about, came on and off 4th grade, then I came back in like 9th grade, came back in 10th grade, going back and forth from DC to Buffalo to Alabama, but spent a lot of time in the country, so I'm a little bit southern, a little bit northern. I got a lot of mixes in there with that southern lifestyle and a lot of that city knowledge also. So spent a lot of time really with my cousins. How you go down in the summer and visit your cousins, running barefoot in Alabama in the woods. I'm talking about deep hunting pigs and stuff like that, going to the creek, getting water, yeah, the outhouse, that type of country. So, but then eventually my parents moved down to Alabama and built a house down there. It was more like in the city, if you can call that area the city, but it was more rural, more urban than the rest of the area, So every time when you go deep into the south, you always have these very rural areas, and then you have a little bit where the town square is, stuff like that. So a little country town called Monroeville.
So a lot of people don't know it's something special about Monroeville. If you ever heard of the story To Kill a Mockingbird, that was one of the stories that took place in Monroeville, and that was one of the most desegregated cities in the South in the early part of the time. So growing up there, can you speak on the diversity that you saw, or if some of the lifestyle changes that you saw differ from the average southern town?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. But Monroeville was just one of those little towns that was a little bit more open. Our school, the high school and the elementary schools, I would say they're about demographics are about 60-40, something like that. It was a very mixed school as far as black and white. You didn't have to worry about a lot of those things. It was some of the surrounding schools that had some more problems like that. Some of them would be, all black. Some of them would be all white. But the school that I was, when I came up in, it was kind of very mixed. It was one of the only ones in the area actually. So, it was, you had friends that were white, you had friends that were black, we all hung together, we all played football together, stuff like that. And, my parents kind of raised us like that anyway. Up north, when we were in Buffalo, our street we grew up on was a mixed street also. And then it slowly, became a kind of a black area. But when I was coming up, my next door neighbors were white and all that kind of stuff, and black, very diverse community.
So being from the South, how did you keep that city mindset, being, saying that you're around your cousins and not conforming to that country, I'm going to do this, I'm going to live like this, I'm going to be complacent? Because, sometimes in the South, we come across a lot of teachers and doctors and just those jobs that, you just want to get paid and die. So how did you have a different attitude in your younger years to leave that town and do something more with your life?
Well, that was basically what my parents doing for the most part. They were very open-minded. My mother was the youngest of, I think it was 8 or 9. I can't remember exactly. I mean, that's a number I am, right? But she was the youngest of all of them, so she was a kind of, open. She raised on the farm, so she left that farm at an early age. Married my father, who was in the Navy. She would leave the farm, go down to Pensacola where the Navy guys would be, and would serve for, I think it was the USO. She would be one of the women that would be there helping the soldiers as they came off. And then eventually, her and my father went ahead and got married. She left Alabama and raised 8 of us up in Buffalo. So she was always open to trying new things, wanted to get out the country. So, even though later on in years she went back home, took us with her, it was really about 2 of us left. So she took me and my sister down there. And I think the hardest part of it you went to the school. I think like I said, I was about 4th grade the first time. And you're kind of adapting to the yes ma'am, no ma'am, and all that kind of stuff. And I wasn't used to that. I say yes and no and all this kind of stuff. But at first, it felt strange. It felt like it was being forced. Back then, you can get paddlings from your teacher and all that kind of stuff if you didn't say it. But, luckily my mom stepped in and she being a teacher, she was also at the elementary school when I was in middle school, but she was an elementary school teacher. And then she would substitute and she really was a Head Start teacher, actually. She would substitute and do elementary school work from time to time. But that was the biggest change. But then after a while, you come to respect the Southern lifestyle. You come to respect the people and why. And, it just felt different. It didn't feel forced. Right now I go to the South, you meet your elders and you say, hey, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And it's out of respect now. When you're younger, you don't really understand that.
So you touched on being the youngest of 8. How was that growing up, seeing that, you were the last, you had, you had all the responsibility, but yet all the freedom. How was that growing up also?
Well, the interesting part about that, when you're youngest of 8, you could learn from a lot of your brothers and sisters' mistakes, right? And they would always talk to me and tell me different things. They wanted things better for me. I've always been very supported by my family. They always encouraged me a lot to do different things, do new things. They never really shunned me in any way and told me I couldn't do something. They always say, try it, see where it goes and things like that. And I think from my parents' point of view, like you were just saying, by the time that I came around, they was just tired. So luckily, I didn't have a lot of, give me a lot of trouble. I went to school, did my work. One of my things is I didn't want my parents to have to come to school and deal with all that kind of stuff. So I just did what I was supposed to do. I get in trouble just like any other teenager would, but it wasn't that bad for me. And I just didn't want to. They were older in age because I think my mom had me at 42. So that I was definitely going to be the last one at that point. And so having older parents, and then all my older sisters and brothers were gone out of the household and things. So it was almost like being an only child again to a certain extent. My next oldest sister is 4 years older than me, and she was gone when I was going into high school. She was graduating high school. So, for the next 4 years or so, it was like being a single kid.
So what were some of the hobbies and things that you did as far as, like you said, your sister was graduating, and sometimes it's hard when you're in high school and you're trying to come into your own and figure out what you're into and the clubs to join and groups to join. So how did you find your way, and what was your hobby of choice?
Well, I come from a musical background. My mother was a singer for the most part, sung in the church, led the choir director, all that kind of stuff. So we grew up with music all the time. And so it was a natural thing to me to be a kind of drawn toward music. So I got into music, playing horns and stuff like that, reading music around 9. So I started about 9 years old, and I actually played music and wrote music all the way up to about I would say, yeah, about 12th grade. So graduating with that, but then this computer stuff started coming out around that time. That was about in the mid 80s. So computers were starting to kick off. You had PCs and stuff that you could actually have in your house to actually work on. So that PC bug kind of bit me, and I kind of abandoned my music a little bit and started focusing more on that. So I still have a blend of the music and the computer stuff. I get back and play my guitar or something like that from time to time, but not as much as I used to.
That's awesome. So after leaving Monroeville and having that tech bug, it doesn't seem like Monroeville will be a big place for tech. So how did you have any like tech friends, or how did you transition with that tech into your adult life?
Well, actually, I wasn't in Monroeville when I got into tech. Like I told you, I would leave from the south, go up north a little bit, and come back to the south. So when I first got bit with the tech, I was actually in the 11th grade. So I went up to DC to spend a school year with my sister. My sister was older too, one of my eldest sisters, so she was about 20 years older than me or something like that. And she's actually about 25. So, she was living there and let me come and stay for the school year. And I think I was taking a class, some type of business class. And they had a PC in the corner that nobody would ever mess with. It wasn't like today's PC. I forget the brand that it was, but it was one of those classes where they had one computer in probably the whole school, and nobody messed with it. So I started playing around with it, in between lessons and stuff like that, and she'll let me get on it. And so I kind of got attracted to it right then. Once you start writing programs and things like that, seeing how interesting it was, then I somehow was able to work at the Library of Congress during that school year. So when I was working in the Library of Congress, I was able to pull books, all the different books I needed, would bring them home and study them and read them and stuff like this. At the same time, I was still doing my music. We had a little jazz band that we was recording with at the time. So I was in between right up in there. So that would be about about 16, 15, 16, something like that. So that's when I kind of got hit with that tech bug.
So tech, around that time, people don't understand, like in the early 80s, before tech was a real popular thing, a lot of people weren't into tech. So how did your family and friends feel about you picking it as a hobby, seeing that you were very intelligent coming out of high school and music was one of your first loves?
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, my sisters at the time, like I said, I was staying with one, and the other one was going to Howard. So, of course, they're always encouraging, but they did pick at me a little bit. Call me Space Cadet, which you read all that. You already into your music. You got a scholarship coming for music and all this kind of stuff. You're good at that. I put a lot of years into it, but once that tech bug hit you, I'm sure you guys kind of understand that now. And I still have my love of music. Like I said, I didn't abandon it. I just did less and kind of tried to balance it out a little bit more. But I just went with the flow. My sisters and nephews and stuff like that would get interested in it just because they'll see me sitting at the dining room table reading these books, and after a while they'll just say, what does this do? What does that do? And so we would challenge each other like that.
That's awesome. So, after leaving Monroeville, like you said, you went back and forth and trying to pick a school. How'd you find your way to Atlanta? Of course, I'm gonna speed the conversation up because I know the whole story. So, how did you end up in Atlanta, and what made you, say, all right, I'm gonna set up shop in Atlanta?
So what happened is, like you said, I just wasn't feeling staying in Monroeville. It's a nice town, but it just didn't have a lot as far as moving forward and the things that was happening with tech. So, I had talked to my parents about it. They, of course, was expecting me to go to Howard and continue with my music and things like that. But I went to them. I was trying to find a good tech school to go to, and at the time, the only really good tech program was out of Atlanta, which was DeVry. And so, I mean, that was one of the top-notch tech schools. They were kind of innovating that area. So that was really the only program I could really go into. And I didn't want to leave too far from the South because, 17 years old, 18 years old, going from Atlanta to Monroeville, that's about a 4-hour drive. And I would still do, just like college students do now, you go back and wash your clothes and spend the weekend with your parents and stuff like that, then come back to Atlanta because actually I had two brothers that lived here. And one of my brothers, he lived by himself, so I had called him and said, hey, I'm gonna come to Atlanta and go to school. At first they were like shocked because everybody, like I said, thought I was gonna go to DC. But I chose to go ahead and come to Atlanta, and I've been here in Atlanta. True. At that time, I got here in '86, and I stayed till '89, I believe it was. Yep.
So, what was your impression of Atlanta coming from Monroeville and having that freedom that your brother gave you? And you know what I mean? Atlanta always seemed like it's been the melting pot for our culture in a whole. But what was it like in the early '90s, late '80s?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, it was a lot going on right at that time. I'm trying to think. I was mainly kind of focused on going to school, really. I would get up. I had morning classes. I would get up, had to catch the bus. I was living downtown, and the campus, Device campus, was in Decatur. So I would have to get up, catch a bus, or I would have to get up and catch a train. And it was between, I would kind of hang out a little bit, but it was all focused around the school. You know what I mean? My friends I met in class, we would go and do some things together. I would go over to Clark. I have friends at Clark. I have friends, that whole college scene is kind of what I was living at that time. But Atlanta proper, I didn't really get into the local life. You know what I mean? Wasn't into that. If it didn't have nothing related to the school or related to my friends that were going to school, I would go between the campuses and hang out with them, go to those college parties, stuff like that. That's about it.
So looking back, seeing what you had as far as the tech jump start, how do you feel about it now, being that, okay, you had, let me backtrack. You had DeVry being one of the top schools in tech, and then you fast forward to 2019 and you see where DeVry is now. How do you feel it's changed tech, or how do you feel like, let me back up again. How do you feel about using DeVry and being a tech person, and where do you feel like it's came now between the time you went there and now?
Well, back then it was, the geek life, the nerd life. Now it's interesting to see that everybody are geeks and nerds now. I'm talking about back then when we had the Casio calculator watches and stuff like that. People look at us like we were crazy. We all were Trekkies, watching Star Trek and all that kind of stuff all the time with that Captain Kirk flip phone and that he used to have. It's a flip phone, really. But it's interesting to see how all of that stuff is become real. It was just imaginary at that time. But if you really want to kind of understand that culture a little bit, one of the movies that kind of signifies how the tech world was at that time, and you can look at, it's a little dated now, but what was that movie, Hackers, with Angelina Jolie in it? That was one of the, it was a little bit later. I think that one was in the 90s, but a little bit in the late 80s. It was just really, really fresh. People were still trying to figure out. Remember, that was well before Windows 95. We used to write our stuff from the command line. It wasn't no graphical interface, no GUI or nothing like that. We just you had to know what your commands were, you had to know what your syntax were. We would have a book with all the phone numbers where we could do dial-ups and things like that, and dial into fastest dial-up connection you would have would be like a 2400, something like that. But it was a lot different.
So after leaving DeVry, you know what I mean? Did you graduate? What was your first job? How did you apply that tech coming out of Monroeville, new to Atlanta, and trying to get your first job?
So what happened? You know, I was a senior at DeVry, and met this girl. That's what things change for you a lot of times, and we started a little family actually. So I had to make some decisions. I had to make some big turning decisions. And one of the things that you know, I always wanted to do is raise my kids, and if I was going to have them, at first I had said I was only going to have one child, and then things changed down the line. But you know, I only wanted one child, and because I wanted to pursue all these dreams and things like that. But so when my girlfriend got pregnant, I had to kind of figure out how I was going to provide for her and what I was going to do. And actually, I had a pretty decent job at the time. I was working for AT&T, and she actually came up to the AT&T building and told me she was pregnant at that time. And I was just about to give me I think it was a MR2 Toyota two-seater. And she was like, I don't think that's gonna work. So I sacrificed my two-seater and started looking for, you know, a place to live and all this kind of stuff. And luckily, I don't know if it was luck, but my brother that I was living with at the time, he decided that he wanted to go into the Peace Corps. So he left. He went to Guatemala and left me at the house by himself. So I stayed by myself for a minute, and then after that, my girlfriend came over. She was pregnant with your mom, of course, and she came over and never left. For the most part, we laugh about that because, you know, she knows that story, and I pretty much asked, "You going home?" And I would get up, go to college, come home, and 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Sometimes she would still be there. I'd leave and go to work, come back about 11. She'd still be there. And next thing I know, she just stayed the whole time. And 20 years later, she still wouldn't go home.
So, just like you said, of course, that's a huge lifestyle change. Having a passion, having multiple passions, coming from a small town, and then like as soon as the next day, as soon as you get that information, your life has changed. How did that change your focus on your passions and your drive?
Well, it made life a lot more serious. Now, you know, I had to get some money. I had to figure out how to stabilize my family, my new coming family. I knew I couldn't continue, you know, breaking in little crumbs and support them. So after a while, I think it was like on a weekend, and one of those military commercials came up, you know, be all you could be, you know, and I thought about it. I said, well, I need about, you know, because I was a forward thinker, I need about 4 years or so to, you know, get something stable, and then I can continue on, you know, the path that I was going. So, you know, I was lucky enough to have some computer knowledge when I went into the military. So I chose a MOS that kind of was along in those lines, but I also wanted to, I always had this little, what I could say, kind of wanted to do something dangerous, or do something kind of, you know, challenging for me. Yeah, that little thrill-seeking type of attitude about myself. You know, I used to race my cars up and down the highways and all that kind of stuff. So that little adrenaline, you know, rush I had, and I always wanted to do that. So I went into a combat MOS, which was definitely exciting. But, you know, of course, that was in the, let's see, that was 89, 90. So who knew Desert Shield and all that stuff was on breakout? And the next thing you know, I got, well, more than I anticipated as far as combat experience. We would, because the MOS I chose was, it's called a, what was the name of that? It was a unit level radio cryptic maintainer, something like that. I can't remember the exact name, but it basically, you were dealing with, it's a radio man, actually. and we would get detached to different combat units to be with them out in the field. And sometimes we would go on retransmissions by ourselves. A retransmission is where you go out, before the unit, and you would set up camp while they would go up further. So an example of that would be, like, for instance, if you wanted to go up 100 miles, the whole unit wanted to go up 100 miles. You would send a retrans unit. It would be 4 of us. We would go up to about the 50-mile mark and set up, because you had to maintain radio communication. So as units would pass by us, we would actually retrans for the 100 miles, because I think at the time the radios would only transmit about 25 or something. No, 50 miles or something like that. I can't remember all the specs, but you get the concept.
So as far as when you joined the military, and like we didn't came to 90, 91, 90.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you maintain, because a lot of people don't understand when you join the military sometimes, and you were older joining the military,
Yeah.
so sometimes when you have a passion and you have some type of creativity, the military can sometimes delete that from your mind. I remember I was a veteran as well, and I used to be a very, very, very avid dancer. Like, at one point in my time, I thought I was going to be a dancer, and the military had other plans for that. So, how did you stay focused with your passion, as well as getting the things you needed to accomplish in the military done?
Well, I did have to pause it a little bit, because doing that type of job, I had to learn it, of course, and I wanted to be good at it. But the way my brain works, I would kind of compartmentalize things. So I was able to kind of put those things in a box for now. Know it was there so I could focus on my military career. I knew it was there. I didn't really, I used computers while I was there, of course. When we had downtime, we had it's cyber now, but it was called a crypto office and things like that. And once my leadership knew I had computer knowledge, it was new, of course. So, I was able to kind of go back and forth between, doing my regular MOS job and then working in the headquarters to do some of their computer stuff, because nobody had that knowledge at that time to actually use the software and stuff like that they had sitting on the shelf. But I had that knowledge since I had already been to college for it.
Mm-hmm. So also, a lot of people don't know that the military is not really fond on independent thinkers. So having that type of trade and having that type of knowledge, but also being an enlisted soldier, how did you transition that, as far as, like, did you run into any troubles? Did you run into any, backlash, having an independent mind?
Well, what made it a lot easier was that my leadership, I wasn't too much younger than my leadership, actually. So, my sergeants and stuff, they kind of would actually lean on me for instructional information and knowledge about, certain things. And so I got a lot of leeway from them. They respected, my schooling. They respected the knowledge that I had already acquired from this. They respected my dedication to learning my MOS. I was actually a pretty good radio tech also. So I would often get pushed out to units when it wasn't even my rotation, because they would request me. Because when I was doing my radio stuff, I was doing my radio stuff. I was focused on that, being good at it, being efficient, things like that. So it's not a lot of in the military that they really knew about my music and stuff like that. I think only my wife at the time, because we did get married just before I went into the military, and that was a different story too. When I got stationed, she came. I think I was at Fort Sill at the time, and she came for my graduation, and out of my MOS, and again, this was a situation where she didn't go back home, because at the time when I left and I went into the military, I had dropped her off in Monroeville to be there with my parents while I went through basic training and my specialty training. And so that was from like July until February of the next year. That brings us up to about 90, February of 90. And so she came, like I said, she came to Fort Sill. Then she pulled me to the side and said, hey, I don't think I'm gonna go back to Monroeville, and I'll stay here with you, and then we'll leave from here to your permanent duty station. And you know, I was cool. We set her up with like I said, I had good leadership. They made sure that she had an apartment off post. When I got some downtime, leave over the weekend, I would go home, you know, check on her and the baby, spend the weekend with them, and then, you know, be back, because we had to stay on post at that time. We couldn't like get off and stay at the house, except for the weekend when we had leave. And then after that, you know, I went to my permanent duty station.
All right, so having a partner and transitioning out of the military, how is that? Because, you know, sometimes your partner don't always have the same mind as you. Sometimes they can't, you know what I mean, go through that, this is what I got to do to get this done type of thing, especially being, you know what I mean, a young adult. And, you know, the military, we don't really have too much time for feelings and explaining things. We just got to execute and deliver. So having a partner in that situation and also transitioning out, how was that, seeing that you seemed like you had a clinger on your hands? So, how was that?
Well, it was interesting because, you know, she, being a mother at a young age, she was basically put her dreams on hold. She put everything, because she wanted to be a dancer and all this kind of stuff, and do videos and all that kind of, well, there wasn't videos at the time. It would be, you know, one of her things was she would be involved in, what you would call that now? Well, I guess you would say it's the same thing. It's sort of like, yeah, I would call it like video dancers and stuff like that. It was something like that. She was always into that. She was into hair and being a stylist and fashion, and she's a really good stylist. And I think she kind of just sat on the bench for a little while, you know, we were just trying to stabilize ourselves. That was really the main goal, because we couldn't really focus on our dreams at the time, because we had to focus on being able to eat, being able to, you know, take care of ourselves. And like I said, before we went into the, before I went into the military, you know, we stayed in Techwood. I don't know, Techwood doesn't exist anymore, but yeah, we stayed there for a little while. Actually, that's where we were living when you were born. You know, I used to walk a lot. I was big into exercise and things like that. I wanted to have healthy children. I didn't want them to not be able to do the things that, you know, I didn't really want to be going back and forth to the hospitals and things like that. So I made sure that she ate right, made sure that she had everything she needed to maintain her health.
So that's a lot. A lot of people don't, you know what I mean? A lot of people aren't resilient to go through that stage of growth. Like, it's kind of like that stage when you're trying to grow your hair out before braids or before dreads, and you got to just sit there and be ugly for a minute. So how were y'all able to stay loyal to one another during that time? Because, you know, it's easy to say, all right, well, I can just figure this out by myself, especially when your stomach start growling and things aren't going, you know what I mean? They're not as fairy tale as they were when, you know what I mean, it was just you and her.
Well, you gotta think of it this way. We spent a lot of time with each other as friends, you know, talking, going back and forth. We loved each other for the young love, and stayed dedicated in that way. We both had dreams. We both wanted to be successful in our lives, and we knew that there was a grinding stage that came before that, because my goal actually was to retire by 36. And so I knew I had to do a lot of stuff. I knew I had to get something going. I knew I had to work toward that. And having a family, it would be harder to do it, because remember, I said that I was going to raise my children. And so it would be harder to do that if we went both our separate ways. You know, like I said, we loved each other, so we didn't really think about, you know, you go your way, I go mine, and all that kind of stuff. It was more like, how we gonna make this thing work? We're better forced together. We can make this, we could be more successful together. So we had kind of created that bond and that had that agreement with each other that despite all, we was gonna keep it moving. Now, have no doubt, being a young couple, that we had fights and all that kind of stuff, disagreements and arguing and things like that. But in the end, we kept our eye on the goal, eye on the prize to say that, hey, this is what we're going to do with our lives. So, we got to figure it out.
So what was the biggest break for y'all going through that? Sometimes you go through that storm and it just seems like it'll never, never, ever get sunny. What was y'all first big break to let y'all know, okay, things are moving, everything we've been through ain't for nothing. This is, you know what I mean? This is our step towards a better life.
Well, let's see, man, it's not a particular event. There's a lot of events that happen throughout the relationship, so it's not going to be any particular pivotal point. It's just how you deal with that situation. Like one time, we got homeless. We lived in the back of a U-Haul. We spent time trying to figure it out then. Once I got into the military, we had it was a struggle then, because I think base pay at that time was like $600 a month. So you had a family, you was married, you'd get BAQ, I think was another $250. So you could imagine trying to pay rent, bills, electrical, insurance. You had a car that would break down, Pampers, food, all that kind of stuff with less than $1,000 a month. And that was a big thing back then, because most soldiers were below the poverty level at that point. But, I did what I had to do. Your mom was very efficient in finding, if we needed it, food banks and things like that. When things got really rough, really hard, I would even go give plasma to get us another $50 or something like that. But then also in the military, when you're remember, you got a team, you got a squad with you, and everybody is going through that. So what would happen is we would start pooling our resources. So we would have a cookout. I would bring the meat, or so-and-so would bring the meat, and the wives would get together, because there's a lot of young couples, young married couples too. Remember, all of us around 20, 21, growing up around that time, but you just military oriented. So you would stick together, no different with, everybody lived in an apartment complex. Like you had some bread, or you had some eggs, and you would share that amongst each other, so everybody would eat. And so you kind of create that bond with all those guys, and the wives would create a bond with each other just on that survival tip. You know what I'm saying? Because, it's hard when you're young. I think I was a PFC at that time, and then became a specialist and all that. So you're still not making a lot of money, but you got a lot of responsibilities. And we just kept grinding at it to make it happen. Wasn't always roses, but in the end, you just had to do what you had to do to make that money, to keep it moving.
Okay. So you leaving the military, and where did you go back to after the military? How did life go after that?
So that was interesting, because I always wanted to go back to Buffalo. So when I decided to get out of the military, and one of the reasons I got out of the military, my career was going actually pretty good, but as I was mentioning, I was in a combat MOS, so I was constantly being deployed. I would leave, go somewhere and be gone, come back and get a couple of weeks, and we would go out to the field, then I'd be out in the field for another month or two, then come back, and it just got tiresome. And I saw my family was breaking down, because I couldn't be there all the time. So when I got ready to get out, I went ahead and got out and went back to Buffalo. Called my sisters in them, because my sisters was still in Buffalo. So I had 2 in DC, and I had one of my sisters that was in DC going to Howard. Like I was saying, she had moved back to Buffalo too. So I had 3 sisters up in Buffalo. So I called them, let them know I was getting out. Went up there, we had the family house there. The family house was a pretty big house. It was actually a two-family home that was converted to a single-family home. So we had one level that had a kitchen in it, and then upstairs it actually had another kitchen. We didn't use it, so I kind of moved into the top part of the house, the top part of the family home, and I stayed there for a while. But and then, of course, you know, in the back of my mind, I needed to finish my schooling, you know, get my formal education done. So I went ahead, as soon as I got out, started going to SUNY, University of New York in Buffalo, and was taking classes there. And then after a while, my wife and my sister just wasn't working too well. You know, having the two families there, she was starting to want to, you know, missing her family, of course, wanting to start pursuing her dreams and things like that. So she, of course, like I told you, she wanted to do hair. That was one of the other things she did. So we decided to, I can't remember if she went to school up in Buffalo for a short time, but we decided to come back down to Atlanta and start stabilizing ourselves there.
All right, so one of the first places I'm gonna skip around and add to, because I'm the host of this my show, I can do what I want to do. But one of the first places that you guys came to was the SWATs, like you said. Kind of like before you left, you was in Techwood. So, what was your love for the Southwest Atlanta area to come back there and kind of build from there?
Well, again, like I told you, I was before I left Atlanta. You know, we moved around a little bit just before I left, and when your mom called her dad, King, and was trying to find out where we could go, where we could stay, he was a super over some apartment complexes, but he also had a little duplex house that he was over. So we called him, told him he was coming. He set us up on the other side of the duplex. We had our own space. We had our own, you know, crib. We didn't have to worry about rent for a little while. He spotted us for that, so until we got stabilized. And I think I had started. That was in August. Well, I got out in August of 94. That was August of 94. So that's when I got out, went to Buffalo, stayed up there, and came back to Atlanta around February of 95. Yeah, February 95. So February 95 was around tax time. So her sister, my wife's sister, Deb, was working at this tax company. And this is crazy how this stuff played out. So, you know, when we got in, she was like, "Oh, my brother-in-law here," and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, I went up to the tax office, you know, meet and greet her. And the person that owned the tax company was having computer problems, and nobody could fix it. You know, I had advanced knowledge in computers at the time, so I started going up there. She would tell me what problems she would have, and then I would fix the problem. But then I also understood taxes. Remember how my brain works, and compartmentalizes a lot of stuff. So so basically, she hired me for that tax season as a computer guy. But as being there, you know, I learned a little bit how the tax industry worked. So I worked for her probably 95, 96 tax year. And in between time, after the tax season is over, I worked for I can't remember what I was doing actually. I think I had worked for a company called Intex. It was a company that worked at the airport, where you would pick up the mail from the planes and deliver it for it to be, distributed and things like that. So I would drive those little tugs around the airport and things like that, pulling those carts and all that kind of stuff full of mail, delivering them, dropping them off, stuff like that. But, you know, I wanted to get back to my computers. I wanted to, I had put my music career on the shelf. So I wanted to get back to, you know, making some progress in some areas. So that's how I started there. Let me see, I'm trying to think of it if there was another time that I was doing something else, but that was pretty much it. It was just these jobs that you would do to make some money. But after that, like I said, I would work in a tax office each season. After a while, it would be the owner and myself, and your auntie. She would work the front desk, but now I became more of one of the preparers now. And so after a while, I had learned the tax business so well that I had approached her and said, hey, I think I can open my own tax office. And I think the pivotal part in that was at that time, you would print out checks out of the computer, how the tax game worked. And the check day was on Saturday, Friday, Saturday, or something like that. Remember, this is before direct deposit. So you would actually come and get your check from the office. So it was a Saturday, and Saturday is always our big day. We have lines out the door, people waiting to get their check. So I got there, opened the office up, and the owner's name was Peaches. So, and Andrina actually is her real name. But I opened the office up, I'm sitting there, people kind of hectic, people want their money. And I'm like, where the hell is Peaches? You know, she usually helped me with this. And I called her on the phone, she called me back. And she was in Bahamas. And I was like, what the hell are you doing in Bahamas? Remember, this is a pivotal mindset change for me. And she said to me on the phone, that's why it's so vivid in my mind, she said, oh, I wasn't worried about it, you got it. And after I hung up the phone, after we got rid of the rush and things like that, I was like, yeah, she's right, I do have it. And so the next year, I opened up my own tax office because, like she said, I got it. And that's how that changed.
All right, cool. We're gonna go ahead and make this part one and end it here because we getting it's getting good, y'all. We getting into the nitty gritty. It's getting to the big bankroll part, the struggle about the end. Little do y'all know, but we're gonna go ahead and end it here, and we're gonna appreciate y'all for listening, and thank y'all for listening. This is gonna be part one of our Hunter episode. All right.